Hello, I'm meteorologist Chris Lasakis for Eyes to the Sky Environmental Services. This is a slideshow presentation talking about the December 2015 northern Mississippi tornadoes, in particular the long track tornado that claimed 9 lives as it moved across northwest Mississippi. We'll take a look first off at some background information. This was the strongest December tornado in Mississippi since December 2nd, 1967, when an F4 tornado touched down in Scott County, Mississippi. The tornado was on the ground for 70 miles, reaching a maximum path width of 3/4 of a mile. As mentioned before, unfortunately 9 fatalities did occur. The storm occurred in an environment that was highly conducive for significant tornadoes, with a moderate risk for severe storms in place and a very ripe environment. Supercell thunderstorm, the particular one that produced the tornado, showed signs of deviant eastward motion while still in this non-severe stage before it became severe and had a warning issued on it. It showed eastward motion. I remember watching the storm take shape on radar, and immediately it seemed to move to the right and jump out ahead of the rest of the storms. And it did this obviously because it was moving more to the right than the rest of the cells. The storms that take on these characteristics must be watched very closely. They tend to produce more tornadoes, and the storm relative helicity that is impacting these storms is much greater because of their eastward motion. This storm caused much meteorological research into the most likely region to receive the strongest tornado activity during tornado days, and how we can improve on tornado forecasts. Violent tornado damage indicators. These are some of the ones I noticed from this particular tornado. Of course, a violent tornado is any tornado that reaches EF4 or greater intensity. There were 2 cinder block restroom facilities slabbed, including all plumbing fixtures, most of which could not be found. This was at the Holly Springs Motorsports Park near Holly Springs, Mississippi. This fact made it somewhat similar to the Smithville, Mississippi F5 that occurred back on the 27th of April 2011. Next is we had 30,000-pound motorhome thrown or rolled or slid about 100 meters. There was a 25-foot section of steel reinforced drag strip safety wall that was knocked loose and split. That's pretty amazing. I mean, this was some thick concrete, again, that was well anchored and well connected to one another. There were multiple instances of large vehicles being thrown 200 plus meters. Dr. Fujita listed large vehicles being thrown 100 meters or greater as an indicator of violent tornado activity. Ground scouring was evident, including several vehicle impact marks in the soil. There was a steel frame structure garage that was well anchored that was removed from its foundation, and a large engine winch was torn from the foundation with fractures in the slab where the anchor bolts tore through the concrete. Several large vehicles were also thrown from the slab. Significant debris granulation was apparent. This is also indicative of a violent tornado, and sometimes EF5s. It's not necessarily a for sure indicator of an EF5, but it is interesting to notice. Also interesting to notice was the radar suggested that this tornado peaked in strength near the Motorsports Park. This would seem to confirm the area of strongest damage did indeed occur near Holly Springs and just to the northeast of there. Moderate debarking of vegetation was observed, and a large section of an aluminum grandstand was transported 500 yards. We'll jump right into some of the pictures now. This figure 1A is one of the 3 cinder block restroom facilities that was slabbed on the property. Notice the bare plumbing flanges where the fixtures were once located. You can see them here from the jagged pipe sticking up. And these are 3 toilet flanges that were here, with a potential for a 4th one here. I'm not real sure what happened there. That doesn't look like there was a flange actually attached, but there's a pipe there. And there were 3 more toilet flanges here on this top deck. And you can see there's no sign of any of the fixtures. And also you have these large pieces of wood that were well anchored into the soil to keep people from driving into the restroom facility by accident, that were bent. And this is indicative of some very high winds and a possible impact resulting from debris. Again, just another view of that same look, that same facility there. Very similar. You can see again the bare slab with the bent wooden poles there that were probably hit by something, is what I would think. This was a 30,000-pound motorhome that we discussed on our rundown just a minute ago that was thrown about 100 meters. You can see the facility that it rests on here was taken away as well. You can see part of the slab here and then again here, and here's a before view of what the facility looked like before the tornado. A couple of interesting things to note here is I am unsure whether or not the motorhome was thrown into this facility and helped to cause its destruction, or if the motorhome was potentially thrown onto this slab after the facility was swept away. So no one really knows. It's hard to say for sure what happened there. Didn't really go up and look at the RV too much to check for potential impact marks or anything like that. But that is an interesting degree of damage there. Is this facility, although maybe not the most well-built facility, is still large, and it was completely blown away with very little debris remaining, and even in sight, not much left. So it's a pretty powerful example of damage there. Here's the drag strip wall. You can see parts of rebar right in through here that was sheared off about every 18 inches to 2 feet. You had these rebar poles here that were anchoring the concrete slabs together. And you can look back here in the general damage scene and notice how intense it is. You have these poles that were part of a chain link fence system are stripped of the chain link, and the chain link was really nowhere to be found. And some ground scouring is evident in places too in this scene. Very intense damage. You can see some debris granulation up against the bottom of the drag strip wall here. So just an overall very intense damage scene. Here was the Motorsports Park Company vehicle, their van. It was thrown about 200 meters. It originally was located down here close to the starting blocks, the starting area of the track. It was again thrown about 200 meters, and Dr. Fujita lists examples like these as being indicators of violent tornado damage, potentially. Here's the impact mark from a dragster. This dragster was actually attached to the motorhome that I showed you a minute ago in a box trailer. And when the tornado came along, it just broke all that off, and the dragster actually obviously was removed from the box trailer and thrown again 200 meters from that location. So very intense tornado damage resulted from this storm. Here's a slab of the garage there at the Motorsports Park where they would operate, replace engines and make other repairs. This was a steel frame facility, and it was blown from its foundation. And there were bolts that were actually ripped from the foundation about every 3 or 4 feet. And I'll show you a close-up view of one here in a moment. There were several large vehicles that were located on the slab that were blown, a couple hundred meters, as well as that large engine winch that was removed from the foundation that had been anchored. Here is an example of an anchor bolt there on that slab to the Motorsports garage. It completely ripped through the concrete. You can see it here. And to the right of it, we have a partially debarked tree. That's also indicative of a potential violent tornado. When you start removing bark from hardwood trees, you start looking at the wind speed range of a violent tornado. And I definitely think that's what we had here. Here's an example of debris granulation. And this isn't the greatest example of this I've ever seen, but it's a pretty good example. You have lots of fine pieces of debris that have been ground up, parts of cars or roofs, facilities, walls, You know, who knows? All ground up into little bits and just strewn about there. And if you'd walk along through this little ravine, you'd see piles and piles of just random material. You could reach up and grab a handful, and there's no telling, you know, what parts of what your material you're actually picking up. Glass, and you'd see parts of little chunks of rubber in there and roofing material. And the winds get so high they grind it up like this when you get into the violent tornado range. Parkersburg, Iowa was the best example of this that I can possibly recall. It was a really good example back from '08. This is a really intense damage scene here. You can see some ground scouring right in through here where the tornado winds impacted the ground with such force that it removed the grass and even down several inches into the topsoil. You can see lots of large debris, lots of large missiles that were generated, a water heater here, and there's another car back in this direction in the woods that had been thrown from the garage that we showed you a minute ago. You know, obviously trees stripped pretty well, not all branches removed, but very intense damage seen, no doubt, with this ground scouring right in through here. Here's some additional violent tornado damage from this bad tornado. This was home near Canaan, Mississippi, Blackjack Road. I didn't actually get to survey this damage, but just looking at the pictures here is pretty amazing. It's a picture from courtesy of the National Weather Service in Memphis here, and this one on the left is courtesy of Google Earth, the satellite. And so this was a large two-story home, and the anchoring was sufficient, and it was completely removed from the foundation except for some, looks like some wall material or roofing material there that you know, settled out after the tornado had passed and fell back onto the slab. But as for the home itself, and I'll tell you, the home is not small. I don't know the square footage that house encompassed, but I guarantee you it was not small. And even the plumbing fixtures are removed from the foundation here. You know, you don't see any tubs or toilets or shower beds or basins or anything like that. Everything is gone. It's a very intense tornado indeed. That was a little to the northeast of the Motorsports Park in the next county, Benton County, Mississippi. Here's the radar representation of that tornado. You can see a large trunk hook right here on the left. This type of hook echo, I have noticed, is generally associated with violent tornadoes. This is a little bit similar to Tuscaloosa from April 27th, 2011, or the May 20th, 2013 Moore, Oklahoma at EF5. And I'm sure we can come up with others if we think, but those are a couple of examples that immediately come to mind. This base reflectivity representation, and you have your velocity as well. Obviously your negative velocities are toward the radar and positives are away from. And so you have a circulation that's cyclonically going about like this. It's a very intense depiction of a violent tornado, no doubt. Something else to think about here is there was a paper written a couple years back from Dawson et al. I believe it was from 2013. I'll have to go back and check, but one of the more recent papers. And it was concerning storm relative wind and how storm relative wind forms what we call ZDR, or differential reflectivity arcs, in a supercell storm. And you can really see that here. I don't have a differential reflectivity chart here or map, but you can definitely see how there would be, for those of you who are experienced in meteorology, see how there would be a ZDR arc here, and caused by intense storm relative wind, storm relative inflow blowing into the storm. And obviously that's helped to contribute to the strength of this tornado as well, as we see that long elephant trunk like hook. Those need to be closely monitored when observed on radar for possible violent tornado activity. This is a loop of the previously shown base reflectivity imagery. You can watch it move through there, and you can see where the hook really becomes the most pronounced and trunk-like is when it was in this area right in through here near Holly Springs, and again indicative of potentially the peak location of the strongest winds within this tornado's lifespan. We'll let it run one more time. So an interesting loop there. Okay, this is the Storm Prediction Center's Day 1 tornado outlook, or severe storm outlook here on the left. Not just tornadoes, but including damaging winds and hail as well. A moderate risk for severe storms existed on this day, running from the southern Mississippi River Valley up into the Ohio Valley. I didn't include the tornado outlook for this day, but it was very substantial, especially across this region right in through here. Outlook for significant tornadoes. And here's the actual storm reports on the right. You can see the tornado reports from the tornado here that we've been discussing right in through here. And there were some other smaller tornadoes that were observed that day. But this was the greatest tornado that day. It was rated EF4. Some height discontinuities. This is something I'm looking into. Won't go into too much about this right now. But look for good things to come from this in the future. I'll just say that. Here's my references, and I hope you've enjoyed this video today. Y'all take care.